The wind howled like a wounded animal, whipping rain against the small, crumbling hut. Inside, Taro sneered at his younger brother, Arin. "You are a fool," he spat, his voice sharp over the storm. "You waste your time feeding birds when you can barely feed yourself." Arin said nothing. He was used to his brother's bitter words. He simply pulled his thin cloak tighter and stared into the weak fire. Taro was strong and ambitious, but his heart was a stone. Arin was gentle, his hands better suited for helping than for taking. As the storm raged, Arin knew he needed more firewood. Braving the weather, he stepped outside into the snarling dusk. The forest was a wall of shadows and noise. But then, a different sound cut through the gale, a faint, desperate cry, like a tiny bell breaking. It came from deep within the dark, tangled trees. Arin forgot the cold, the wood, everything. That cry pulled at his heart. He pushed through wet ferns and low-hanging branches, following the pitiful sound. There, caught in a nest of cruel thorns, was a bird. But it was like no bird he had ever seen. Its feathers were as white as fresh snow, and they seemed to glow with a soft, inner light. One of its wings was twisted, bleeding a strange, silvery fluid onto the dark leaves. Old tales whispered in his mind, stories of forest creatures that were not what they seemed. To touch one could bring a blessing, or a curse. He hesitated, his hand hovering in the air. The bird looked at him, its dark eyes filled with a pain that seemed too human. With a gentle touch, he began to carefully untangle the thorns. When Arin returned, soaked and shivering, he cradled the white bird in his hands. Taro looked up from his meal and burst into cruel laughter. "What is this? More charity for a creature that will be dead by morning? You are even more of a fool than I thought." He shook his head in disgust. "Feed it and starve, brother. See where your kindness gets you." Arin ignored him. He found an old basket and lined it with soft cloth, making a nest near the warmth of the fire. He offered the bird a few drops of water from his own cup. "Even a small life deserves kindness," he whispered, more to himself than to the silent bird. That night, as the storm finally passed, a strange sound filled the hut. It was the bird, singing in its sleep, a haunting, beautiful melody that sounded almost like a human lullaby. The bird's song wove its way into Arin's dreams. He stood by a river that flowed with starlight instead of water. A woman with hair as white as the bird's feathers knelt on the bank, her back to him. She spoke without turning, her voice echoing like wind chimes. "Mercy will cost you, but cruelty costs more." The dream felt more real than the waking world. He jolted awake, the first light of dawn filtering into the hut. His eyes went immediately to the basket. It was empty. The bird was gone. The door was still latched from the inside. His heart sank. But then he saw it, a single, luminous feather, silver as moonlight, lying where the bird had slept. As he picked it up, a soft, hesitant knock came from his door. Arin's heart hammered against his ribs. No one visited at this hour. He opened the door slowly. A woman stood there, pale and trembling, her clothes soaked through as if she had been walking all night. Her hair was the color of fresh snow, and her eyes held the same deep, knowing look as the bird's. On her arm, a faint scar curled like the shape of a bird's wing. She looked at him, and a small, tired smile touched her lips. "You once helped me," she said, her voice soft as a breeze. "May I help you now?" Arin could only stare, his mind reeling. He had told no one about the bird. Yet she stood here, on his doorstep, as if she knew everything. She knew his name, though he had never spoken it. Her name was Lyra, she said. She had no home, no family. Arin, with his kind heart, could not turn her away. She moved into the small hut, a quiet, graceful presence. Where Taro was loud and demanding, Lyra was gentle and helpful. She mended the holes in their roof with a skill that surprised Arin. She tended their meager garden, and where her hands touched the soil, plants seemed to grow greener, stronger. She sang while she worked, the same melody the bird had sung. The very forest around their home seemed to breathe easier, the colors becoming more vibrant. But Taro watched her from a distance, his eyes narrow with suspicion. One evening, Arin saw Lyra staring at the rising moon, whispering words in a language he could not understand. A week after Lyra arrived, Arin woke with a start. The space beside the hearth where she slept was empty. A cold dread filled him. He slipped out into the night, the full moon lighting his path. He followed a faint trail of glowing footprints deep into the woods. His breath caught in his throat. Ahead, he saw Lyra's silhouette standing before the ancient, crumbling shrine that everyone in the village feared. As he watched, her form began to shimmer, like heat rising from stone. Then, in a flash of soft light, she was gone. In her place was the white bird. It flapped its now healed wings and flew straight towards the sealed doors of the shrine. The heavy stone doors glowed with an eerie green fire, then swung open just enough to let her through before slamming shut. The next morning, the village was buzzing with fearful gossip. Old Man Kale grabbed Arin's arm at the well. "Did you see the lights in the forest last night? Green fire at the old shrine. The spirits are restless. It is a bad omen." Taro listened to the whispers, a calculating glint in his eyes. He didn't believe in omens, but he believed in opportunity. Strange lights, a mysterious woman who appeared from nowhere, his brother's sudden good fortune with the garden, it all pointed to one thing, magic. And magic could be sold. It could be power. It could be gold. He decided then and there to discover his brother's secret. He would spy on Arin and this strange woman, Lyra. He would learn the source of this power for himself. Life with Lyra was a blessing Arin had never dreamed of. Their garden overflowed with vegetables. The water from their well ran clear and sweet. Birds of every color nested in the trees around their hut, their songs filling the air. Arin felt a peace he had never known. But Lyra often looked towards the forest with a worried expression. One evening, as they sat outside, she turned to him, her voice serious. "This life, this abundance, it is a gift. But you must never boast of what is given freely," she warned. "There are those who would see it not as a blessing, but as a thing to be stolen." Her eyes were dark with a warning he did not fully understand. Unseen behind a thick oak tree, Taro heard every word. A slow, greedy smirk spread across his face. That night, Taro followed Lyra. He moved like a shadow, his steps silent on the forest floor. He saw her kneel before the ruined shrine. But it was not ruined anymore. A vast, majestic being stood there, a figure woven from ancient tree roots and dappled sunlight, with eyes like deep pools of forest water. The Forest King. His voice was the rustle of a million leaves. "Your debt to the mortal is nearly repaid, daughter of the sky," the king said to Lyra. "Soon, you will be free." Taro's breath hitched. A debt? A king? His mind raced, not with wonder, but with greed. This was more than he had hoped for. If he could control this spirit, or the power she represented, unimaginable wealth would be his. Taro went straight to the village elder, a stern man named Brahm. He spun a clever lie. "The spirit of the forest can be captured," he claimed. "It can turn silver feathers into solid gold. I have seen it. Help me, and its power will be ours." Elder Brahm's eyes, usually so wise, glittered with avarice. He promised Taro a vast piece of land and a chest of silver if he could bring proof of this power. Fueled by greed, Taro spent the next day in the blacksmith's forge. He did not make a weapon of iron. He crafted a small, beautiful cage from the finest silver he could afford, weaving strands of cold iron into its design, a metal said to bind magic. "No spirit escapes me," he whispered, testing the lock. He did not have to wait long. The next full night, Lyra slipped away again. Taro followed, the silver cage hidden under his cloak. He watched from the bushes as she began to shimmer and change. The moment she was fully in her bird form, he sprang from his hiding place. He threw the cage over her before she could take flight. The bird let out a sharp, terrified cry, a sound so human, so full of despair, that it chilled Taro's blood despite his greed. The white bird threw itself against the silver bars, which began to glow with a harsh, white light. As Taro laughed in triumph, the moon high above them slowly began to turn a deep, bloody red. Arin woke from a deep sleep, his heart pounding. The ground beneath him was trembling. The walls of the hut groaned. He rushed to Lyra's sleeping place. It was empty. A cold certainty gripped him. He ran out into the chaotic night, the earth shaking with each step. He followed the path he had taken before, straight to the shrine. The forest was in an uproar, trees swaying violently. On the ground before the shrine's glowing doors lay a single, silver feather, crumpled and torn. She had been taken. His eyes scanned the muddy ground desperately. And there, clear as day, he saw them, the distinct print of his brother's worn left boot, leading away from the shrine. Arin ran, his fear giving him speed. He found Taro at the edge of the village, dragging the glowing silver cage. Inside, the white bird was frantically beating its wings against the bars. Taro! Stop! Release her! Arin cried, blocking his brother's path. Taro's face was a mask of wild triumph and greed. You are a fool, brother. You chose mercy. I choose fortune. This creature will make us rich. He shook the cage, and the bird inside let out a pained chirp. She is not a thing to be sold. Arin pleaded, reaching for the cage. As his fingers brushed the silver bars, the cage erupted into a blinding, white-hot light that threw both brothers to the ground. The light faded to reveal a towering fury. The forest king stood before them, his form now made of storm clouds and cracking timber. The very air hummed with his anger. Mortals, his voice boomed, shaking the trees. You who cage mercy shall yourselves live in chains. He pointed a branch-like finger at Taro. The silver coins in Taro's pouch melted, the hot liquid seeping into his skin, branding him with greedy, golden scars. A great rumbling began, and the earth split. Thick roots and twisting vines erupted from the ground, snaking through the village, pulling houses and fences down, dragging the entire village into the earth. Chaos reigned. People screamed as their homes were consumed by the living forest. Arin crawled to his knees before the enraged king, his body trembling not from fear, but from a desperate courage. Great king, he shouted over the roar. My brother's greed is his own. The people here are innocent. Punish me if you must, I will bear it, but please, let them live. He bowed his head, waiting for the end. The roaring stopped. An eerie silence fell over the ruined village. The forest king turned his immense, ancient gaze upon the kneeling young man. He studied Arin in a silence that felt heavier than any sound. And then, without a word, the great being vanished. Taro awoke in absolute darkness. He was trapped in a tight pit of twisted, living roots. They pressed in on him from all sides. And then the whispers began. Every lie he had ever told, every cruel word he had ever spoken, echoed back at him, growing louder and louder, a prison for his mind as much as his body. Above, the curse had lifted, but the village lay in ruins. The people stared in shock at their destroyed homes. Arin, ignoring his own shock and grief, wandered the scarred forest, calling Lyra's name. He found the silver cage, its door hanging open, bent and broken. But it was empty. There was no sign of Lyra, bird or woman. His feet led him back to the shrine. The stone doors were sealed once more, but a faint light pulsed from within. He pushed, and with a great groan, they opened. Inside was not a room, but a vast, star-filled space. A voice echoed, neither male nor female, but ancient. Arin, son of mercy. Would you free her, even if the price was your own life? Would you trade your breath for her wings? Arin did not hesitate. He thought of her kindness, her song, her secret pain. I owe her my life already, he said, his voice steady. I offer it freely. As he spoke the words, the great stone doors behind him slammed shut, sealing him inside forever. The starry space shifted. He was standing before a pool of water that shone like a mirror. Visions played upon its surface. He saw himself as a boy, sharing his meager lunch with a stray dog. He saw himself taking the blame for a broken tool to protect a younger child from Taro's wrath. He saw every small, unseen act of kindness he had ever performed, and every cruelty he had quietly endured. The visions were not meant to praise him, but to test him. Did he regret his choices? Looking at them all, a single tear of pure, unburdened compassion rolled down his cheek. It fell into the pool of visions, and where it touched, it burst into a brilliant, warm light. In the center of that light, Lyra appeared. But she was trapped, bound by dark, thorny vines that glowed with a sickly green energy, the remnants of the Forest King's curse. She looked weak, her eyes closed. The ancient voice spoke again. The cage is broken, but the binding remains. A life for a life. Your strength for her freedom. Understanding dawned on Arin. He walked forward and placed his hands on the thorny vines. Take me instead, he whispered. As he spoke, the vines unwound from Lyra and snaked around his arms, his chest, pulling him down. He felt his strength flowing out of him, into the forest floor. Lyra's eyes fluttered open just in time to see Arin smile softly at her before he faded, dissolving into a cascade of light that was absorbed by the roots at his feet. Outside the shrine, a miracle happened. Sunlight, brighter and warmer than any before, pierced the gloomy sky. The roots that had crushed the village gently receded, leaving the land soft and fertile. The broken houses seemed to repair themselves, the wood fresh and strong. Trees sprouted new leaves and burst into magnificent, fragrant flowers. The curse was over. Lyra stumbled out of the shrine, her body whole again, but her heart breaking. She fell to her knees where Arin had vanished, her tears watering the earth. I would have stayed, she wept. I would have chosen you. As her tears fell, the Forest King materialized before her, his form now gentle and full of spring light. The debt is paid, the Forest King said, his voice now a soft murmur of leaves. But true mercy does not end in death. It births new life. He reached out a hand of woven willow. You, who were saved by kindness, shall now become its guardian. He touched her forehead, and a crown of living vines twisted into her white hair, blooming with silver flowers that shone with their own light. Lyra felt a new power flow through her, the power of the forest itself. She was now the guardian of the woods. But her heart ached with a final request. She looked at the king, her eyes still wet with tears. Your power is now your own, guardian, he said. You may ask one boon. She whispered, let me see him one last time. At the first light of dawn, near the ancient oak tree where Arin had first found her, the earth glowed. The grass parted, and Arin stirred. He took a deep, ragged breath, as if waking from a long sleep. He was alive. He looked around. The world was transformed. The forest was a paradise of color and life, more beautiful than ever. And standing beside him was Lyra, radiant in her crown of silver blossoms. But her form was shimmering, growing faint, like morning mist. She helped him to his feet, her touch already feeling less than solid. She smiled, a smile full of love and sorrow. The debt is repaid, she said softly, echoing the king's words. Her time in his world was over. Lyra stepped back, her form dissolving into 1,000 points of light. They swirled together, and for a final, breathtaking moment, she was the white bird once more. But now, she wore a tiny, perfect crown of silver leaves and blossoms upon her head. She looked at Arin one last time, her bird's eyes holding all the love and gratitude words could never express. Then she beat her wings and flew upwards, not into the sky, but into the very air itself. Her body burst apart, dissolving into a shower of starlight that rained gently down upon the entire forest, blessing every leaf and stone. Arin watched, his heart full of a sweet, aching peace, as a single, crowned silver feather drifted down and landed softly in his open palm. Years passed. The village prospered, its people living in harmony with the enchanted forest that protected them. Arin remained in his hut, which was always warm, his garden always plentiful. He was a humble man, never seeking glory, but travelers who met him spoke of a deep, abiding peace in his eyes. Children in the village grew up hearing the tale of the kind man and the bird woman. They learned the lesson their elders took from it: kindness given freely returns crowned in grace. Arin lived a long, quiet life, never alone, for the forest was always with him. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would hear the whisper of wings and a voice, gentle on the wind, reminding him and all who listened of the story's final truth: mercy never dies.